Yo, what's up guys, Vahlkx here, and today I'm going to go over my updated bunny build. So my last build that I posted here, it's still good. If you want to use it, that's completely fine. But I honestly thought it was a little too tanky, so I try to figure out ways to just make it a little harder while still, having that survivability to it. So I went ahead, I experimented with, full crit, wasn't much of a fan of that. And then I kind of brought down some of the crits, added back more survivability, some like cooldown stuff, and honestly, where it's at right now, I think is kind of perfect. It has a nice balance between killing bosses quickly, being able to survive, and most of all, the most important thing for Bunny is mobbing. So yeah, I'm just gonna get right into this video, explain my build to you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy. So my first build here is Yerp, but it's pretty much my mobbing build, and so what I use on this one is Bionic fuel. So this will consume HP instead of MP, and what I like about this is that you can pretty much run infinitely. This is a nice quality of life to have, and you don't die if you get low unless you get shot by an enemy, so you can just, like I said, infinitely run with that one. For all my builds, I do like to have increased survivability, so I use increased HP here, and then stim accelerant. So I use stim accelerant here because bionic fuel means you're using HP and not MP, so losing MP does not matter for this build. If you wanted to, because let's say you have it built up already, you could use HP amp and kind of switch that out with accelerant. Next up is range. So I always have skill expansion on most of my builds. I feel like it's kind of a mandatory one, just to make your skills kind of hit more consistently. And then on Bunny, I also add maximize range. Now honestly, I tried out like a full crit build as Bunny, wasn't much of a fan of it. And you kind of sacrifice some range trying to do that kind of build. And if you're doing that, and trying to mob as Bunny like that, you're just losing out on so much efficiency by losing out on range. So I keep these two here for my mobbing build all the time. As for my two damage mods, I am using Focus on Singular and Focus on Electric. So I mentioned this before, but I use the Focus on mods because I like the skill cooldown that it gives. And then you use Electric Power because it'll help buff out the whole kit of Bunny to do more damage. And then Focus on Singular will help kind of increase the damage on the main ability here for mobbing, which is a Lightning Emission, which is a singular ability. And finally, the two changes I made to my build was adding crit. So I only added 2 crit mods. Like I said before, I did try a full crit build in these 4 slots, but again, wasn't the biggest fan there. And so what I did here instead was just have 2, and I found it to work very well still. So I used skill concentration, and I used skill insight there, which is crit rate, crit damage, and like I said, I found this to work pretty well. Honestly, it's a good balance between damage and tankiness and just like duration and everything, so I found this build to be perfect. Now from the orange mod that I'm using up here, I am using HP Collector. I just like it to give a little bit more sustain as you're going around killing enemies. And for the final mod that I'm using is going to be Nimble Fingers. This one will just help add on to that skill cooldown, which will help kind of keep that uptime on the third ability here. So 18.7 seconds on cooldown, duration is 20, so I can pop that whenever and it'll constantly keep doing the Lightning Emission. So like I said, the 2 changes I made was putting these 2 crit mods here, and then I decided to keep the M slot here. I know some people will remove it, but I like to have it because it can help kind of bring down cooldown. So for example, I don't use any external components that have cooldown or duration. Same thing with the Reactor. So I have constant uptime here on my third ability. That's perfect. I have great survivability with all his HP, good damage too, and then most importantly, the range for my mobbing build. That is a must. It makes things so much more efficient. So I like how it kind of turned out here, and I'm just gonna get right into my next one, which is gonna be my bossing build. For my bossing build here, I'm using high voltage. Pretty much like most Bunny players should be running this if you have it, because the damage you get from it is kind of hard to pass up. And what this pretty much does is it takes out the AoE you kind of get from the first and third ability. It'll do more damage, it'll have more range, and then it doesn't mention this, but when you hover over the third ability, it brings down the cooldown from 30 seconds, I believe it was, to now 22. So you can kind of better work around that now, and I'll kind of explain what I did with that in my bossing build. So because the cooldown is down now, you don't really need, the focus on mods. So I'll start off with kind of the damage mods here. So instead of using the focus on, I switch it to the blue ones to just up the damage slightly. So I got electric seal power there, and then singular skill power modifier, again basic stuff, more damage in general, and more damage for the third ability. Now since I don't run duration or cooldown on my reactor components now, I put time distribution just to bring down the cooldown just slightly, so I do have constant uptime there. But then this one also gives me more survivability and bossing, so that is a pretty good plus there. And speaking of survivability, I stick with increased HP, and then instead of stim accelerant, I use HP amp, because you're gonna want MP to just run around more, and honestly, taking a hit on the shields is whatever. Shields aren't the greatest thing in the game right now, so that is completely fine. And to add on to more kind of survivability here, I use Spear and Shield, gives me defense, and then the skill power modifier. This scales very good for most abilities in the game, so I kind of use this one in general for most of my builds. To really make sure that I'm consistently hitting the boss, I continue to use skill expansion. Again, I feel like this is a staple for a lot of builds, so I'll keep that there. And for my yellow mod, I use Dangerous Ambush. So I mentioned this in my VS video, but when the boss is kind of in that down state, you'll be getting that immobilized enemy, skill power 50% pretty much. And, it's also good in group play. You'll get the 25% right there. And so I like using this because skill power scales much harder for most abilities in the game compared to the modifier. So this just brings out a lot more damage to your abilities. And the final changes I made here were, the crit stuff here. So I got skill concentration for damage and skill insight for crit rate. And for my third and final build here is going to be kind of the MP based version of, my mobbing build. So honestly, I don't really use this at all. But this is to give you guys options if you don't have Bionic fuel or if you don't like using it. And so for this one, you can use high voltage. You don't really need it. It works fine without it. But you use maximize conservation for the skill cost and MP collector for, MP sustain. You have HP here for survivability. You get the 2 focus on for the cooldown and the, just damage boost. You got the 2 range mods for the, max kind of range you can get for most efficiency as you're farming. And finally, the changes I made with the other 2, builds I have are the 2 crit mods. So just crit damage, crit rate. Off to my reactor here. It's not like the one that I want, but it's honestly still pretty good. The one I would probably want is like double crit, so crit rate, crit damage, but again, this one is perfectly fine, gets me through things just fine. And so what I have here is Thunder Cage mounting, because Thunder Cage is my main weapon. I have the singular power boost there because as Bunny you're going to be using lightning emission mainly for your damage. And then I have Attack on Colossus. Again, it's not bad, it's pretty good for bossing, so I don't mind having that. And then I do have half of what I want, which is the crit damage, so that is perfect right there. I'm pretty happy with this reactor, so that's kind of what I will stick with. So for my components, I've recently been using the Slayer set, and the reason for that is because of kind of its versatility of kind of being able to be used on most builds for like different characters as well. And for the Bunny, you can use the Slayer set, or you can also use the Supernova. I've kind of bounced between the two and they both work perfectly fine. Kind of up to you, but that is kind of what I do for bossing. For mobbing, you could stick to the Slayer set if you wanted to, but I like just having a little bit more defense and whatnot, so I will switch to 2 Supernova and 2 Annihilation, so that is what I run here. Now as for my weapons, like I said, Thunder Cage is the main weapon I'm going to be using. I do have the updated version of that on my VS video the other day, but I also want to build up other weapons just to have kind of more like, versatility. So I am building up a Devotion that is like halfway there. I just got to put more catalyst on it. And then I have started to make an Afterglow, so that is probably going to be like my whole kit for my weapons that I'm going to kind of focus on right now. So yeah, that's what I got going. One more thing I'm going to add on with kind of the build and catalyst setup I have going here is the variety it can provide. So, I noticed some people are starting to kind of shift to shields with Bionic fuel. Personally, I might not do it because the build works fine just as is, but if that is something you want, you can easily switch out increased HP for increased shield, take out accelerant for shield collector, and then at that point you figure out what you want to use for this X slot. But like I said, I think the build I have works just fine. You don't really need to invest into something else like that, but the option is there. So that just about does it for my updated bunny build. So what I really like about it a lot now is that it's still very efficient and effective for both mobbing and bossing, and it still gives you a lot of variety, kind of work around different kind of builds for that. So I think this time around, this is pretty much my finalized bunny build, unless, you know, something changes or, you know, comes new mods or whatever. But for now, this is what I'll be running. One more thing I forgot to mention is that I'm now in the Nexon like content creator program thing, so I will have the code here on the screen. I'll put it down in the description below as well, but if you guys do want to support me out that way, I'd appreciate that a lot. But again, thank you all for watching, and I hope this guide helped, and I'll see you guys in the next one.